Hello, everyone. In recent years, dating apps have seen a big rise, possibly because of less socializing during the pandemic. But on Tinder, finding love can be tough. If you've used Tinder, you've probably come across some not-so-nice people. After hearing these stories, you might want to consider deleting the app before things get worse. I'm not exactly what you'd call a player when it comes to the dating scene. In fact, I've always been a bit skeptical of dating apps. There's just something about swiping through endless profiles, judging people based on a few carefully curated photos and a short bio that doesn't sit right with me. Call me old-fashioned, but I believe in meeting people the old-fashioned way. You know, face to face. But when I stumbled upon Tinder, it felt like I should give it a chance. I was just hoping for genuine connections with real people. I figured I'd give it a shot, see if I could meet someone interesting without all the usual hassle. That's when I came across Jenna. She had this quirky bio that caught my eye, something about loving 90s sitcoms and having an unhealthy obsession with her cat. She seemed different, you know, not like the other girls I'd seen on those apps, all duck-faced selfies and generic quotes about living life to the fullest. We hit it off right away. Our conversations flowed effortlessly, filled with jokes and banter that made me laugh out loud more than once. She was smart, funny, and surprisingly easy to talk to. Before I knew it, we were texting back and forth every day, sharing details about our lives and getting to know each other on a deeper level. It wasn't long before Jenna suggested meeting up in person. She seemed genuinely excited at the prospect, and I have to admit, I was too. There was just something about her that drew me in, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. We agreed to meet at my place, a decision that seemed harmless enough at the time. I mean, I live alone in a decent-sized apartment in the city, so it made sense for us to hang out there. Plus, it would give us some privacy, away from the prying eyes of nosy strangers in crowded bars or coffee shops. When Jenna arrived, she looked even better in person than she did in her photos. Her smile was infectious, lighting up her face and making my heart skip a beat. We hugged awkwardly in the doorway, both of us laughing nervously as we exchanged pleasantries. We spent the next few hours getting to know each other better, chatting and laughing over a couple of beers. Jenna was surprisingly easy to talk to, opening up about her passions and interests in a way that made me feel like I'd known her for years. But as the night wore on, I started to notice something strange about Jenna. She was getting increasingly intense, for lack of a better word. Like, she kept inching closer and closer to me on the couch, her eyes locked on mine in a way that made me squirm uncomfortably. I tried to brush it off, telling myself she was just nervous or maybe a little tipsy from the drinks. But the more time we spent together, the more I started to feel like something wasn't quite right. There was this undercurrent of tension in the air, like a storm brewing on the horizon. And then, out of nowhere, Jenna leaned in and kissed me. It was sudden and unexpected, catching me completely off guard. I froze for a moment, unsure of how to react, before gently pulling away and awkwardly clearing my throat. I think I should probably call it a night, I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the rising panic in my chest. Jenna's face fell, her eyes darkening with disappointment. "Oh, come on," she pleaded, reaching out to grab my hand. "Don't you want me to stay a little longer?" I hesitated, unsure of how to respond. On one hand, I didn't want to be rude or hurt her feelings. But on the other hand, something about Jenna's behavior was setting off alarm bells in my head. "I'm sorry," I said finally, pulling away gently. I think I need some time to myself." Jenna's expression hardened, her lips twisting into a frown. "Fine," she snapped, standing up abruptly and grabbing her coat from the back of the couch. "If that's how you feel, I'll just leave." And with that, she stormed out of my apartment, slamming the door behind her so forcefully that the walls shook. I sat there for a moment, feeling a strange mix of relief and unease wash over me. Something about Jenna's behavior just didn't sit right with me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I dodged a bullet by ending things when I did. I tried to put the whole thing out of my mind, chalking it up to a weird and uncomfortable experience. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. That night, as I lay in bed trying to fall asleep, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered in the air. It was like a weight pressing down on my chest, suffocating me with its intensity. And then, just as I was finally starting to drift off, I heard it. A faint creaking noise coming from the direction of my closet. My heart skipped a beat as I lay there frozen in terror, listening intently for any sign of movement. Seconds stretched into minutes as I lay there, straining my ears for any sound of intruders. But aside from the steady hum of traffic outside my window, the apartment was eerily silent. I mustered up every ounce of courage I had and slowly made my way to the closet, my hand trembling as I reached out to grab the handle. With a deep breath, I flung open the door, half expecting to find an intruder lurking inside. But the closet was empty, save for a few stray hangers and a pile of old shoes. I let out a shaky sigh of relief, chiding myself for letting my imagination run wild. And then I saw it, a flash of movement out of the corner of my eye, just barely visible in the dim light of my bedroom. I spun around, my heart pounding in my chest as I searched frantically for the source of the movement. That's when I saw her, Jenna, standing in the middle of my bedroom with a knife clutched tightly in her hand. Her eyes were wild with anger, her lips twisted into a cruel sneer as she took a step towards me. "You shouldn't have rejected me," she hissed, her voice dripping with malice. I stumbled backwards, my mind racing as I tried to process what was happening. How had she gotten into my apartment? And more importantly, how had she managed to sneak up on me without making a sound? But there was no time to dwell on those questions, not with Jenna advancing towards me with murder in her eyes. With a surge of adrenaline, I turned and bolted out of the room, slamming the door shut behind me and locking it with shaking hands. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers slipping on the screen as I dialed 911 and frantically explained the situation to the operator on the other end. My heart pounded in my chest as I listened to the sound of sirens growing closer and closer, each second feeling like an eternity as I waited for help to arrive. When the police finally burst through the door, I led them back to my bedroom, my heart pounding in my chest as I braced myself for what we might find. But to my horror, Jenna was gone. The room was empty, save for the faint smell of her perfume lingering in the air. There was no sign of forced entry, no indication of how she could have possibly escaped. It was like she had vanished into thin air. The police searched the entire apartment, scouring every inch for any trace of Jenna, but it was as if she had never been there at all. And as they questioned me about what had happened, I couldn't help but feel a chill run down my spine. I knew what I had seen. I knew Jenna had been there, standing in my bedroom with a knife in her hand. But now, as I stood there surrounded by police officers, it felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The evening started like any other typical night for a 22-year-old navigating the wild world of Tinder. I was casually swiping left and right, half-heartedly sifting through profiles of guys posing with fish or flexing in front of bathroom mirrors. But then, as if by fate, I stumbled upon a profile that made my heart skip a beat. It was him, the guy from high school, the one I never really talked to but always secretly admired from afar. His face, slightly older now but still unmistakably familiar, stared back at me from the screen. Without hesitation, I swiped right, and to my delight, we matched almost instantly. We started chatting and it felt strangely comfortable. Memories of our high school days flooded back as we reminisced about classes we had together and teachers we both couldn't stand. It was surreal reconnecting with someone from my past in such an unexpected way, but it also felt oddly natural. Before I knew it, we had exchanged phone numbers and made plans to meet up later that evening at his place. The excitement and nerves mingled in my stomach as the clock inched closer to 11 p.m., our agreed-upon rendezvous time. He texted me the address, casually mentioning that the front door would be open for me to come straight in. I checked the time and realized I was a few minutes early. With a mix of anticipation and impatience, I decided to kill some time by scrolling through Instagram, and that's when everything took a bizarre turn. I saw his story, posted just 5 minutes ago, showing him on the beach with a group of friends. My heart skipped a beat as I zoomed in on the photo, noticing 3 unfamiliar girls by his side. Confusion washed over me as I quickly tapped out a response. "WTF are you doing at the beach? I thought we were supposed to hang out." His reply was swift. "What are you talking about?" It hit me like a ton of bricks. I'd been catfished. Panic surged through me as I realized the gravity of the situation. If I had blindly followed his instructions and walked into that house, who knows what could have happened? I shuddered at the thought of the potential danger I had narrowly escaped. Without hesitation, I reported the fake profile to the authorities, hoping they could trace it back to whoever was behind this elaborate deception. But by the end of the day, the Tinder profile was gone, leaving no trace of the person who had impersonated my high school acquaintance. As I lay in bed that night, the events of the evening replayed in my mind like a horror movie. I couldn't help but wonder about the motives behind this elaborate ruse. Who would go to such lengths to deceive someone like that? And what could they have possibly hoped to gain from it? How did this person know the name of the teachers and how they were? It had to be someone from high school. Despite the unsettling experience, I couldn't shake the feeling of relief that washed over me. I had narrowly escaped a potentially dangerous situation, all thanks to a last-minute Instagram check. It was a harsh reminder of the dangers lurking in the world of online dating, and a lesson I wouldn't soon forget. I sat in my car, the sting of yet another breakup fresh in my mind. It felt like a vicious cycle, jumping from one failed relationship to the next, each one leaving me more disillusioned than the last. With a sigh, I pulled out my phone and opened Tinder, hoping to find a distraction, maybe even a spark of something new. As I swiped through the profiles, I came across one that stood out from the rest. His pictures were attractive, his bio witty and charming. Against my better judgment, I decided to shoot him a message. To my surprise, he replied almost instantly, and before I knew it, we were engaged in a lively conversation. His humor was infectious, and I found myself laughing at his jokes as we exchanged playful banter. It was a refreshing change from the usual awkward small talk I'd grown accustomed to on dating apps. Before long, the conversation took a steamy turn, and I felt a rush of excitement coursing through me. We agreed to meet up in person, opting for the parking lot of an abandoned supermarket nearby. It seemed like the perfect spot, secluded enough for privacy, yet not completely isolated. As I drove there, my heart pounded with anticipation, a mix of nerves and excitement swirling in my stomach. Pulling into the empty parking lot, I spotted a sleek black Mercedes van parked in the corner. It seemed out of place in the desolate setting, but I brushed off the nagging feeling of unease and stepped out of my car. I scanned the area, but there was no sign of him. Taking a deep breath, I began walking towards the van, my footsteps echoing in the silence of the night. But as I approached, a sudden realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I hadn't actually seen the guy yet. Panic gripped me as I realized the gravity of the situation. Retreating to the safety of my car, I quickly texted him, insisting that he come out before I approached any further. His response was dismissive, assuring me that everything was fine and urging me to come over. But I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that gnawed at my insides. Ignoring his protests, I continued to demand that he show himself first. The tension hung heavy in the air as I waited for his response, my heart racing with fear and uncertainty. Silence followed, and my anxiety skyrocketed as I bombarded him with messages, each one more frantic than the last. Suddenly, I snapped back to reality, my senses on high alert as I glanced up and saw 4 shadowy figures emerging from the van. Dread washed over me as they began to approach my car, their movements purposeful and menacing. With a surge of adrenaline, I slammed my foot on the gas pedal, the screech of tires filling the air as I peeled out of the parking lot. My hands trembled as I dialed the police, my voice shaking as I recounted the terrifying ordeal. It was a close call, and as I drove away, shaken but unharmed, I couldn't help but feel a wave of gratitude wash over me. Trusting my instincts had saved me from a potentially dangerous situation, and as I drove home, I couldn't help but wonder what might have happened if I hadn't listened to that nagging voice of doubt.